Well, hello from Budapest, Hungary, the Szechenyi Baths. Forgive me for my butchering of the Hungarian language. Goulash soup, goulash soup, goulash soup, goulash soup. Hello and welcome to another episode of Mantar. Thank you all so much for coming back. If it's your first time, welcome to the show. And as promised, today we have a new travel episode, a new episode of Mantar Global. I am so excited for this one. This is my second international trip on the Mantar channel, the second of many, many more to come. And I've been teasing this trip for a while, and if you follow me on Instagram or Twitter or any kind of social media, you probably know that I did travel to Budapest in Hungary. And actually on the last day, I traveled to another town in Hungary, which if you stick around to the end of the video, you will see it was a beautiful little town about an hour and a half outside Budapest. And I saw so many things there, and I have so much to say, so I don't want to bog you down with too much talking in the beginning. But just as always, before we get into it, if you like this content, go ahead and hit that little subscribe button. It is of no cost to you, but it is tremendously helpful to me. Also, leave a like, a comment, hit that little notification bell so you don't miss future Mantar videos. I know you don't want to miss future Mantar videos. All of those things are very helpful to me and the algorithm and this channel and all of the above. So like I said, I don't want to talk too much. I want to get right into it. I want to show you Budapest. I want to show you the other town in Hungary that I went to. And at the end of the video, I'll discuss a little bit about what this trip cost me and what something similar might cost you if you choose to visit yourself. But otherwise, without further ado, here is my trip to Budapest in Hungary in 2024 on the latest episode of Mantar Global, starting right now. So, welcome my friends to the Central European nation of Hungary. That was drilled into my head when I was there. It is a Central European nation. That is what they consider themselves. Hungary is a landlocked country, bordered to the north by Slovakia, the northwest by Austria, the southwest by Slovenia, Croatia, the south by Serbia, and the east by Romania and the Ukraine. So I arrived after my 10-hour journey and getting my first impressions of the city as my taxi was driving me to the hotel. One thing to note about Budapest is that apparently Uber is actually operational there as of an article dated March 6, 2024. But for a very long period of time, Uber was not there. And actually, I was under the impression that there was no Uber in Budapest. However, there is an app called Bolt. I will leave the information for it in the description below. And Bolt functions like Uber. You order your car the same way, and a yellow taxi shows up. And it's my understanding from reading this article that in fact Uber in Hungary also sends you yellow taxis. My taxi was driving me through the streets of Budapest, and I was getting my first glance at the city. And my first impression was how much graffiti there was. Now, I was talking to a friend who says, oh, that's all of Europe. Sure, fine. I haven't been to Europe in 11 years, so it's been a while for me. But there was a lot of graffiti, which was just very interesting to me. And that was an impression I held with me throughout the entire trip. So I got to my hotel and took a quick nap. Not too long because I didn't want to throw off my sleep schedule any more than it already was, but a quick 30-minute power nap. And then I was up and at 'em and ready for lunch. And the first thing I did was I had to find a Hungarian staple, Langos. And as it happens, there was a Langos place right around the corner from my hotel that was very, very highly rated and had long lines out the door, so I figured I was going to be good there, called Retro Langos. Now, Langos, for those of you at the edge of your seats wondering, is a very popular Hungarian street food. The original version is fried bread topped with sour cream and cheese, but there are a whole lot of variations these days with it. So I got a slight variation on the original and got sour cream, cheese, bacon, and onions. And let me tell you, oh my gosh, was this the perfect first meal to have in Budapest. It was absolutely delicious and super, super filling. So I would recommend, if you are there with friends, to split one. It's very, very heavy, and I had to take a long walk around the city and walk it off when I was done. But hey, that's exactly what I did. So the next thing I did was just take a little walk around the neighborhood to just get myself oriented. I didn't really know where I was going, but the first thing that I saw within 2 blocks was St. Stephen's Basilica, which on the exterior is gorgeous, and it's gorgeous in the interior also. More on that later when I visited. And from the Basilica, I found myself walking down a beautiful cobblestone street that looks pretty touristy, but it was very nice, and just taking in the gorgeous architecture that's really just present citywide. Well, hello from Budapest, Hungary. I just arrived here this morning. Super excited. I have the next few days. Look how pretty. That's a basilica in the background. I am looking forward to the next few days where I have a few things on my itinerary that I'm really excited for, and I'm excited to see the city and get to know it better, and for you guys to come along with me. So let's go. All right, day 2, up and at 'em and ready to see the city. All right, guys, we are on our way to the Dohany St Synagogue. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And this is, according to what I've read, this is the largest synagogue in Europe. I'm also visiting this site one day before Passover, which is really interesting. So it was actually the only day on the trip that there are tours, because then they have to get ready for the holidays. This was built in the 1800s. I think it said 1859, but I'll confirm that on the tour, and I'm excited to see it. So yes, the Dohany St Synagogue is the largest synagogue in Europe, seating about 3,000, and construction on the synagogue was completed in 1859. The synagogue today is where Neo-Log Judaism is practiced, which is, to the best of my understanding, the Hungarian version of Reform Judaism. Someone correct me in the comments if it's more nuanced than that. I'm sure it is. And as you can see, the exterior of the synagogue is very beautiful to look at. It was actually built in a Moorish style, which is why it sort of looks like a mosque on the outside. As you can see, it is enormous, really visually appealing and grand, with chandeliers hanging from a beautifully designed ceiling and an impressive design up at the front. The complex also has a cemetery and memorial to Hungarian Jews that were murdered during the World War II period, when Nazis did have control of the territory in Budapest. The synagogue is also located in the former Getto in Pest. It was my first time visiting a site in Europe that had formerly been a Jewish ghetto. So from the synagogue, I took a little walk around the neighborhood again just to orient myself with more of the area, and then it was time to try the metro. So the metro station for me near my hotel was the Opera station, which was next to the Opera House. And for my public transit while I was in Budapest, I bought the 15-day pass, which was good on all public transit. I used the Budapest Go app, which I will leave a link for in the description. And for 5,950 Hungarian forints, or about $16.40, I was able to get the 15-day pass for public transit. And the first thing I noticed is that there are no turnstiles and no visible way to pay my fare. I was looking around and the train just showed up and I got on it. So I was a little bit confused about that, but I did find out later that basically there are staff within the system that will ask to see your ticket or your pass, and they will scan it, They are just not at every single station. So you never know when you may run into a staffer who wants to scan your ticket. In the week that I was there, I would say it happened to me about 3 times. So that's a very different system from other public transit systems that I've had in other states in the US and other countries. I hear it is a very hefty fine from the authorities if they ask to scan your pass and you do not have one. I would make sure to always have your ticket to be on the train, whether it's an unlimited pass or a single ride ticket or any other way that you're trying to get onto the train. So this was the number 1 train, or I don't know how they would describe it, the 1 line. It was about 3 cars long. It was a very small train, but it was fast, it was efficient, and it was clean. In the entire time I was there, I did not see one single homeless person in the subway system, which is incredible when you come from a city like New York or DC or really anywhere else in the US. And off the subway, I went to the House of Terror Museum, which is a very interesting museum and probably a must on the list of museums if you're gonna go to Budapest. By the way, yes, I've said Budapest and Budapest in this video. It is pronounced Budapest correctly, so I will try and do better with that. At any rate, the House of Terror is a very, very interesting museum. And unfortunately, I was not allowed to take pictures or video inside the museum, so you're gonna have to deal with me sitting on the couch explaining it to you. The House of Terror Museum goes through from the Nazi period in Hungary to the communist period, which followed right afterwards. It talks about the German influence that followed with the Soviet influence and the communist period in Hungary, which lasted from the end of World War II until 1989. And from the locals I met, they are very acutely aware of the horrors of communism and fully aware of their history and have no desire to repeat it. So the museum takes you through a bunch of rooms, and each room is a different time period and a different explanation. It shows some of the uniforms worn by authorities. There's a lot of films to watch, and there's a lot of artifacts from the time period. The museum is also housed in a building that was previously used by the Hungarian Arrow Cross Party, which was the Nazi party in Hungary, and then subsequently used by the Hungarian Communist Secret Police. So it's very interesting and a kind of a first-hand look into history. And so then it was time for dinner. So where did I go for my official first dinner in Budapest? I went to a restaurant, and I'm going to, disclaimer, I'm going to butcher all of these names. I am terribly, terribly sorry to people who speak Hungarian, but I will have links to all the restaurants down below. So if you speak better Hungarian than me, you can correct me in the comments and you can pronounce it correctly when you go there. So the first restaurant I went to for dinner was a restaurant called Porc and Prezli, which was a very nice traditional Hungarian restaurant with red checkered tablecloths and traditional food. So I started off with a must-have dish when you're in Hungary, goulash soup. It is delicious, and I believe the best goulash soup I had would have to go to this restaurant, Porc and Prezli, so shout out to you guys. It is a beef soup with vegetables and sometimes with noodles, and it is a delicious, hearty, and honestly quite filling soup. So if you're gonna have it as an appetizer, which I did, make sure not to have too much or you might not be hungry for the rest of your meal. And for my main dish, I had the potato breaded pork chop topped with garlic sour cream and cheese, rice, and peas, which was delicious, but again, very, very filling. I definitely ate too much at that meal. And I finished things off with a Hungarian sponge cake with chocolate rum sauce and nuts. Okay, now on to day 3. On our way to the I'm gonna mispronounce the fuck out of this. The Szechenyi Baths. Forgive me for my butchering of the Hungarian language. But yeah, Hungary is known for its thermal baths. So really excited for this. Okay, yes, the thermal baths are a must try if you are in Budapest. So after a quick subway ride, again on the number 1 line, I arrived at the I still don't know how to pronounce this correctly, Szechenyi Baths, which looked magnificent on the outside, and I was so excited to see how it would look on the inside. I had seen pictures on the internet and I was just stoked. So the first thing I did was I got myself a private changing room, which is slightly more expensive than if you were to change in the communal areas and get a locker. I paid 11,500 forints for the baths with the private changing room, which equates to about $31.69. So one thing to know, at least about this particular bath complex, they do not provide towels and they do not provide flip-flops, both of which are mandatory. So if you do not bring those, you will have to buy them, and they are available for purchase at the bathhouse, but of course it is going to be a highly inflated price. I found out the hard way and I had to purchase my towel and my flip-flops there, but ultimately now I have a souvenir. My towel says the name of the baths on it, so I'm very happy. The changing room, I'm not gonna lie, looked kind of depressing and daunting, like a military barracks or something. And the main event is really how stunningly gorgeous the view is from the outdoor pools. All right, let's see what these thermal baths are all about. Now, these thermal baths are really what they advertise themselves to be. The water is supplied from thermal springs and are highly packed with minerals, including sulfate, calcium, and magnesium. And you can really smell it on the indoor pools. It does kind of have a sulfur smell, and it does take some getting used to. But all the pools and baths that I used were warm and pleasurable to sit in. As you can see, it was very crowded, and after a while, the crowds became a little too much. So after I had taken in the outdoor and indoor facilities, I went right over next door to Heroes Square. All right, guys, well, I am standing here in Heroes Square in Budapest, and it's quite impressive. It's got a bunch of statues, and the Millennium Monument is up there standing tall. And I'm sure it looks impressive on the video, but it's really quite impressive when you see it in person. It's a dedication to, I believe, generals and war heroes of Hungary. I was looking at the statues. A lot of them are from the 1300s and 1400s, around about that era. There is now also a dedication here to people who lost their lives for Hungarian independence during the communist era. It's pretty cool. So after all of that, it was time to check out St. Stephen's Basilica, the famous basilica in Budapest. And let me tell you, I had seen it from the outside on my first day, and now I was going inside. The tickets to St. Stephen's Basilica, if you want an all-in-one ticket, it is 6,000 Hungarian forints, or about $16.54. And the all-in-one gets you access to the church hall, and it also gets you access to the lookout at the top of the church, where you can see a stunning panoramic view of the city. I highly, highly, highly recommend getting the all-in-one ticket. It is slightly discounted from if you buy them separately, and it is well worth it to go up to the top and take in the view. This day happened to be a Monday, which had an organ concert at 5:00 p.m. in the church hall, and your all-in-one ticket does include access to the organ concert. So as expected, the inside was gorgeous, with beautiful statues and incredible architecture and paintings on the ceilings and on the walls. I did go up to the top, and as I mentioned, it is a very, very pretty panoramic view of the city, with the church's towers right behind you, and you can really just take a look at all of the architecture. All right, so let's go back down into the church hall and listen to some of this organ concert. just like that, it was time for dinner, and I visited probably my favorite restaurant in all of Budapest, Getto Gulyas. So what was on the menu tonight? Well, we started off with goulash soup because I just had to have goulash soup with every meal that was available to me. And then for my main dish, I had a true staple of Hungary, chicken paprikash, which is chicken in a paprika sauce. The Hungarians love their paprika. They put paprika in everything. Served with egg noodles or bread dumplings or that kind of thing. It's similar to Spätzle if you've ever had German food. And then I had a dessert special, which was like, I think a raspberry or something kind of sponge cake. It was another sponge cake. It was very good. And then, which was turning out to be one of my longest days there in terms of activities, we had to take a little night cruise on the Danube. So this cruise was offered by Legenda Cruises. I will leave the link in the description below. And the night cruise is slightly more expensive, but that's because the night cruise is well worth the price increase. The city is lit up at night. I just highly recommend this night cruise. All right, day 4, and venturing across the Danube to the Buda side of Budapest. Fun fact, Budapest used to be Buda and Pest, and they used to be two different cities until in 1873 they merged and became Budapest. But it is still two distinct sides of the Danube. I was staying on the Pest side, and until my 4th day, I had only been on the Pest side. All the sites that I was looking at were on the Pest side, but finally we went to the Buda side to take in a few other sites.
Heading over to Buda Castle, first stop.
So Buda Castle is the former site of the palace where the Hungarian kings would sit. It was apparently first completed in the year 1265, although the current building that is there was built in the 1700s. Nowadays, the Buda Castle complex is actually home to 2 museums, the Budapest History Museum and the Hungarian National Gallery, both of which cost money for entry, and neither of which I really had time to do justice in spending time at those museums. So instead, I walked the castle grounds, which was more than enough to take in some beautiful views across the Danube and to admire the once again beautiful and grand architecture of the building complex. And then from the Buda Castle complex, it is a short walk to Matthias Church. Matthias coming from the name Matthew, so of course I had to go. Another stunningly beautiful church on the outside and on the inside. So then it was time for another first while I was in Budapest. I had to take one of those old style trams that runs along the streets, which you don't ever see anymore in the United States except maybe in San Francisco, but are ubiquitous in Budapest. They're everywhere.
I can't believe I'm on my 4th day here, and this is the first time I've tried the tram.
So the tram was your basic public transit accommodation, but it was pretty cool to be just on the tracks going through the city of Budapest with the cars right next to you on either side. I commend the drivers because people are crossing the streets in front of the trams and cars are crossing the tracks all the time, and somehow they manage to navigate all of that and get you through to your destination in a pretty quick amount of time. My next stop off the tram was the Great Market Hall, or sometimes called the Central Market Hall, which was basically a 2-story food hall directly on the bank of the Danube. And it has everything: meats, cheeses, vegetables. It is just, if you like food markets, you gotta check out Great Market Hall, or I think it's sometimes called Central Market Hall. And it wouldn't be a food market hall in Budapest without 2 things. 1, paprika everywhere. Bags and bags and bags of paprika. And the other thing that it had, which is something you have to try when you're in Budapest, chimney cakes, which are basically these long cones of dough which have some kind of flavor on the outside. I saw like vanilla, chocolate, whatever, but I was told that the classic is cinnamon. So I got myself a cinnamon chimney cake, and boy was it a lot of sugar, but it was good. All right, and time for my third dinner in Budapest. For this one, I tried Vak Varju. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And what did I start out with? Goulash soup. Am I getting predictable yet? And for my main course, I had the confit beef cheek with bread dumplings and sour cream. Very, very good. Beef cheeks seem to be a thing in Hungary as well, which is interesting when you just look at the name, but honestly, when I ate it, I thought, well, it just tastes like beef. And for dessert, I had the cottage cheese dumpling with macaroon flavored sour cream. That was very good, but it was a very heavy, creamy dessert. So I didn't finish it, but it was very good. Okay, day 5 and my last full day in Budapest. So the first thing I was going to try and do was take a tour of the Parliament building.
It is very cold and rainy on this late April day, and you know how thrilled that makes me. And I may have been better off buying a ticket in advance online, so we're gonna see if there are any in-person tickets, but the website made it look a little grim, so pray for me.
So obviously upon arrival to the Parliament building, I had already seen it from the Danube, but I don't know if I have seen a building quite that stunning ever in my life. It is just a magnificent work of art.
Yeah, the tickets were absolutely sold out, so for those of you who really want to tour the Parliament when you come to Budapest, I would recommend reserving online. I suppose a tour is going to have to wait till my next trip.
Oh well, you live and you learn, right? All right, time to get on the metro. And this time I'm taking the metro line number 2. I didn't make it to number 3, but I was on 1 and 2. And the 2 line was a lot more modern looking and a longer train and more similar to just sort of other trains that I had seen in other cities, rather than the number 1 line, which was a little sort of old and antiquated looking. So I thought that that was interesting. And off the number 2 metro line, it was time to visit the New York Cafe. And the New York Cafe hails itself as the most beautiful cafe in the world. It is a beautiful place to have lunch. It's got high ceilings with intricate designs, with painting and moldings on the wall that are just stunning to look at. I'm running out of words to use for beautiful, but it's just gorgeous. I opted for what they call the Franz Josef experience for 2. I was only 1, and that was the sort of afternoon tea option that they had that was available for a 1-person serving. So it started off with goulash soup. I had a lot of goulash soup when I was there. And continued with a classic afternoon tea tray of pies and cakes and tea or coffee. And that was pretty much it for the sights that day. I actually took a little time to rest in my hotel room for a bunch of the afternoon. I think the exhaustion had caught up with me. I did have a very nice last dinner in the city of Budapest. I had one more day in Hungary, but this was my last dinner in Budapest at a restaurant called Tati, which was a little bit more upscale, but still served your Hungarian classics if you wanted them. And I actually opted for something they had on their menu, the 5-course Hungarian tasting menu. This was a good choice just to get a whole bunch of different things. It started out with smoked beetroot with drizzled yogurt and pine nuts, then went on to goulash soup, and then a vegan stuffed cabbage dish with tomatoes and fermented red cabbage, chicken paprikash, which is a classic there, and rounded out the meal with cottage cheese dumplings with chocolate mousse, apricot jam, and pumpkin seed sand. I left very full and very satisfied. Okay, day 6 and my last day in Hungary, and I left Budapest to go 2 hours outside the city to a little town called Eger. So first of all, the drive through the Hungarian countryside was gorgeous, and it had beautiful mountains in the distance and was just very pleasing to look out the window. And so we arrived in Eger, and to sum it up quite perfectly, it was a fairy tale town with beautiful buildings and families everywhere with their children, and it was just comfortable. So we got to take a tour of Eger Castle, which is the site in 1552 where the Hungarians drove out the Ottoman Empire, and we got to learn a little history about how the Hungarians were apparently significantly outnumbered, but managed to overpower the Ottoman Empire anyway in that battle, and so they are very proud of that castle. We were treated to a tour of the castle done by tour guides in traditional garb. They even demonstrated shooting an old school long gun, the kind that may have been used during the 1552 battle. The tour of the castle was really cool. Took us through a bunch of stone rooms with statues honoring the different people who were around in 1552, and rooms that took us through the history of Eger and the history of the castle. Our tour guide even took us down into the former sewers of the castle, which were very, very claustrophobic tunnels deep underground. So if you are afraid of the dark or claustrophobic, I don't recommend that part of the tour. I believe you can only go into those areas on a guided tour, but heads up, if the guided tour takes you down there, it is tight and dark and cold. But it was really, really cool nonetheless. And from the castle, you get the most picturesque view of the city, and the highlight of the castle tour, of course. So after our tour of Eger Castle, we were treated to a little tour of the city. And then we headed up to a restaurant called Boar's Bar for dinner, which was located on, forgive me for being redundant, but a sort of little fairy tale lane. And we were treated to a wonderful 3-course meal of goulash soup, a sort of smorgasbord of traditional Hungarian dishes, a chicken paprikash and a Hungarian sausage, with the bread dumplings and sour cream and paprika, and it was just a nice big meal. And for dessert, some more sponge cake. That was pretty much it. Then it was back on the bus, 2 hours back to Budapest and a flight back to New York in the morning. And that, my friends, closes out my experience in Budapest and in Eger. I am so, so grateful for this trip. I don't think I've been in a city or a country quite that beautiful in a while. From the architecture to the churches to the synagogue to the cruise on the Danube to the stunning New York cafe, it is just a worthwhile place to visit. And I want to emphasize that because I don't know if your standard American traveler has Budapest like first on their bucket list of places to go. And I don't know if you want to put it first after seeing this video, but definitely put it on your list if you are looking to travel to different places in Europe. My experience of the city is that everyone was friendly. I felt very safe in that city. The subways and the public transit was clean and efficient. And there are just so many sights to see and views to take in. It's just a really, really worthwhile trip. It's also not the most expensive trip you could take in Europe, so that's another plus. So as promised, I'm gonna run down some of the expenses for you. So my flights from New York City to Budapest Airport, round trip, $1,166. There are actually cheaper fares than even that available if you choose a basic economy ticket, but I never choose basic economy because you don't get a seat assignment ahead of time, and I don't like to brave that on transatlantic flights, so I pay for the main cabin seat. These prices fluctuate greatly, so that was the price that I paid. If you're looking to book a trip, it may be significantly higher or lower. You never know with these airlines, so always check with the airlines and shop around. My hotel bill was 125 euros per night, which is about $134 per night, and I was staying in a Hampton Inn, which is a Hilton property. It was clean, it was nice, everything was nice about the hotel. $134 a night. That's really good. Most of my dinners, which remember included a soup, a meal, and a dessert, averaged about 13,000 to 14,000 Hungarian forints, which is to say anywhere from about $35 to $38, which is a lot cheaper than you're gonna get in a lot of other European countries or in major cities in the United States. As I said, the public transit was affordable. Even the sights to take in, baths were about $30, as I mentioned before. The Basillica was about $15, as mentioned. The cruise on the Danube was about $22.50 American. So it is not a particularly expensive city. And I hope you were able to see from this video that you can have an amazing time and see some amazing sights especially for the moderate price that you will likely be paying. So that's all I got, folks. Thank you all for sticking with me, and I'm really interested in your comments for this video. Let me know in the comment section below what you think. Have you ever been to Budapest? Was your experience the same as mine? Was it different? Did I miss anything that I should have seen while I was there? I do intend to go back someday, so I will take your recommendations to heart. If you haven't been there, are you looking at going to Budapest now that you've seen this video? Suffice it to say, I'm very interested to hear what you all have to say. And again, if you like this content, liking, subscribing, viewing the video, all of these things really help this channel, and all of those things will allow me to keep traveling and keep pumping out the travel content, particularly your subscription to this channel. So I do thank you all in advance for your support. I am looking to travel again in the near future, so stay tuned for more Mantar Global very soon. But until then, and until we meet again, everyone out there in YouTube land, have a wonderful afternoon, evening, night, morning, whatever time of day you're watching this. I love you all very much, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.